How many football fans do we have in the room today? Seeing as though we're in Birmingham and we're in a cricket stadium, let's talk about football because that clearly makes sense. How many Aston Villa fans do we have here today? Aston Villa. Oh, I forgot the main man's here. Aston Villa. How many Birmingham City fans do we have here today? One. No, not you. Gentleman at the back. And any West Brom Albion fans? Okay, never mind. Clearly we're not in West Bromwich Albion territory. That's okay. Anyway, thank you for staying. Thank you for being here towards the end of the day. My name is Dal Darroch. I'm the Head of Diversity and Inclusion at the Football Association based at St George's Park and Wembley Stadium. I have two very esteemed guests with me today. Everybody knows about the power of football. Football has the power to change society. You only have to look at recent news, recent trends in social media to understand that football has a huge impact on the way that we live our lives. Football is also good for getting involved in exercise, in well-being. And why are we here today? We're here today to talk about inclusion in football. It's very important. And we're here to share some knowledge and some statistics and some experiences about what football means to Asian communities. Because when we think of Asian communities, which sport do we think of? Ifraz, what did you say? Yes, we think of cricket. And it's a complete fallacy that Asians cannot play football. It's just not true. We will explore that today. Just want to introduce my guests with me today. So we have Nilesh Chauhan here from the Football Supporters Association and Gurpri Bains from Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. Guys, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yep, my name's Nilesh Chauhan. I am the Fans for Diversity campaign manager. I started my football journey when I was a young kid. Started playing football for my mother. Then I started growing up and then I was playing football for my colleges, university. Finished college, university, and then I started playing a little bit of semi-pro, and then went into Sunday League football. After that, I became a football coach. Started coaching football everywhere else, but what I had to do was, for me, at that time, football wasn't something that I could do full-time, so I reduced it to part-time hours, and I went into IT. And I've been working in IT for about 10 years, and now I've got a great job now where I'm working for the Football Supporters Association.
Brilliant, thank you. So from IT into football, which clearly demonstrates there are transferable skills in the game. We'll come on to that later. Gurpri, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, so my name's Gurpri Bains and I'm currently the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Manager for Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club. I've been in this post for a year this week. It is a new role to the organisation, so I'm kind of getting to set the benchmark of how we can do equality, diversity and inclusion in the 21st century. But how I got into football is growing up at school, never really played football. I don't think football was an option. We had stuff like netball, basketball, athletics, but not really football. My only early memory of football is David Beckham and Posh Spice. So we all know the film Bend It Like Beckham, and I think we all kind of became Manchester United fans because of the whole Posh and Beck situation. Someone just shouted Liverpool. But like, when I grew up, I didn't think, I want to work in football. I didn't really know much about football. When I studied, I did A-levels in like media studies, a bit of English literature. But when I went to university, I did something completely different. I did events management, and how I got into football was through sports, and just community engagement was my kind of stepping stone into the game.
Thank you very much. Everybody, so Gurpri's just mentioned Bend It Like Beckham. How many of you have recently watched the Lionesses, the women's England team at the World Cup, or who saw them lift the trophy at the Euros? How many of you? Quite a few of you. My little girl over there is shaking her hands. The power of football, the rise of the women's game, and seeing what the Lionesses have done very recently. The challenge we have now is getting more people from Asian backgrounds into the game, and that's what the FA is trying to do. That's what my team is trying to do, is making sure that people see that there is an avenue for you within the game, whether that's playing on the pitch or whether that's working behind the scenes like these two do, you know, going from a role in IT or events management and moving into the football industry. You can be a doctor and still work in football. You can be a finance manager or a lawyer and still work in football. You can work in sport. The industry needs all types of skills. And we all know that Asians are excellent in vocational skills, business, entrepreneurship, law, medicine. Where we lack is the arts, music, and sport. So we're really in a position now where next generation, 3-4 generations in now, that we should really be concentrating on these kind of vocations. And the two here are great examples of taking those skills with them. Guys, how would you describe the state of football at the moment for people who are trying to break into the industry and they're from Asian backgrounds? How would you describe that?
I think it's a lot better than what it was. Definitely a lot better with the resources that are available to people, the information that's available to people, and how you can get that information as well easily these days. There's a lot of panel events now that people can turn up to and ask questions, whether it be about getting in football themselves or whether it be about talking about how to deal with their child in football, their football journey. So I think at the moment, it's at a really good stage, but it can get better.
And what is Fans for Diversity? Like, what do you actually do?
So Fans for Diversity was set up in 2015. It's in partnership with the Football Association, a Sports Association, and Kick It Out. What we try and do is get people from all backgrounds to football games that have never been to games before. So they may have a perception about going to football. They may think football grounds are not for them. Now I can give an example of that where before this role, I was running a supporters group called Villains Together. And one of my first things that I did was opposite Villa Park, there was a Muslim women's community sports centre. That community had never been to Villa Park before. So I went in there and I spoke to the ladies there and I said, look, I want to take you to Villa Park. They went, they had claret hijabs, they watched the game and they became flag bearers. But the most powerful thing about that day was there was 4 ladies that didn't understand English, but at full time, they understood the game. So that's how powerful that was. So that's how powerful our campaign can be as well.
So you're focusing very much on diversifying the fan groups that we see and fans in football across the game.
Yeah, across the game, 100%. We want everybody to feel that they can walk through a football stadium and enjoy matches.
And Gurpri, you represent Wolverhampton, which is in one of the most diverse regions for Asian populations in the Midlands. Black country, not quite Brummies, not quite this side of the Midlands. Having said that, what does Wolves do across the Midlands in order to engage the types of people that we see in the room today, Asian communities? What do you do?
So just to echo your point about being the most diverse, I want to say, city in the West Midlands region. So according to the census, Wolverhampton actually has the highest population of Sikhs, which I was quite surprised about. So that's not outside of Birmingham and London. They are predominantly in the Wolverhampton area. The special thing about our football club is we're literally in the city centre. So on one side, you've got a mosque, and the other side, there's a Gurdwara. You've also got an Asda superstore. But I think in terms of our club, we've kind of got like 4 different pillars. So every football club has a charity, and that charitable arm does a lot of participation and engagement work, and they do a range of programs, which could be like a Head for Health, it could be a physical activity session, it could be working within secondary and primary schools, and that strand of the business we call participants. The youngest participant can be 3 months old. They do a lot of things with like newborn babies. The eldest participant could be 75 plus, for instance. At one point, we actually had a 90-year-old fan that used to come to our match days, and she was on the dementia program. So we look at participants, and there's a range of projects that are available for people to use and access for free. And some of them might also be paid to participate, and some of them could be funded by the NHS, for example. Over in the football club, we have an ethos called One Pack. So together we are part of the pack. It's kind of a play on our logo, which is the wolf. Over in the football club, you've got a range of careers, which is on the pitch, off the pitch. So you've got people who could be coaches, working in finance, head of health and safety, anything to do with match experience. And then we've also got our supporters. And one interesting thing about Wolverhampton Wanderers is we were the first of its kind to have a supporters group, which is called Punjabi Wolves. They're not here today, but they actually turned up today because they kind of champion that South Asian inclusion, but more about inclusion between other groups of people. So sometimes on a match day, they might bring the music, the vibes. But as a football club, we've been quite progressive in some of our policies and practice. So in terms of our athletes and players, we've signed a thing called the Muslim Athlete Charter. And that's around Muslim inclusion within the professional playing space, but also things that we are doing within our workforce and on a match day. So some of the things we've implemented is like a multi-faith prayer space, for example. The provision of prayer facilities for athletes when they go to home and away games, but not only just the athletes, but the players that might work with the athletes or your everyday people that do the 9 to 5 behind the scenes. We're also the first football club to have a Gurpri policy around religious wear when you enter a stadium. So inclusion has been, I want to say, a bit of a golden thread within the club way before my arrival. So I'm going back like 10 years. But my role now is to kind of put together an equality, diversity and inclusion strategy around the different groups of people and how are we using data to measure our progress, but also how are we celebrating some of the key inclusion dates throughout the year. So we recently celebrated South Asian Heritage Month, which I hope you're all aware of. It's celebrated between July and August, but the FA obviously did some amazing work around that space as well.
Yes, we did. Talking of faith, obviously South Asian communities now make up 6 to 7%, 4+ million people now in this country. Asians as a whole make up 10% according to the census, the latest census of 2021. So it's very clear in terms of minority communities that it's the Asian populations that make up the biggest proportion of those individuals. Having said all of that, from a faith perspective, I'm not sure how many of you actually know that the largest iftar ever held for Ramadan in a football stadium took place this year at Wembley, where we had close to 1,200 individuals all break their fast with us at Wembley Stadium, at the home of English football. I'm not sure, how many people know about that? Does anyone know about that here, apart from the people who work in football? So it's really important that you do more to really try and understand where football is trying to make sure that they are engaging people from different communities and from different faiths. 2 days after the open iftar, we had 650 Sikhs at Wembley Stadium celebrate Vaisakhi with us for the first time ever. On both occasions, we were able to recite prayer. We had the Adhan that was recited at Wembley Stadium on the pitch on the 12th of April of this year, which was absolutely amazing. It was beamed across the world. 2 days later, we had the Sikh prayers also beamed within the Wembley Stadium bowl, the actual insiders, if you are sitting there watching a game. It's the kind of things we do to demonstrate that first football cares, that the FA cares, but also this game is for everybody. This game belongs to everybody and it should be inclusive and everyone should be able to have access to the game. So if you want to learn more about what we're doing across football, what Wolves and the clubs are doing, please go to thefa.com/Asian inclusion and you can learn more about all the work that we do across our particular communities. Now, we've talked already about off the pitch. I want to talk about on the pitch because there is a common myth that if you're Asian, you just can't play football. And I want to get the views of the guys. Guys, dispel the myth for me that if you're Asian, you can't play football. Nilesh, what do you think?
Completely disagree. You can play football. I used to play football, not of the standard, but you can play football. And you can see the people that are coming through the door now. You know, you got Arjun Reiki. You've got loads of, Mal Balling, excellent players that are role models in the game now. And it can happen, but it happens with hard work. It's not, you can't just have talent. It has to have that hard work element to it.
Yeah, and in terms of Wolves, Gurpri, are you seeing more Asians coming through your elite pathway, so your academy systems and your women's game? What does that look like now?
So for South Asian Heritage Month, we celebrated the diverse community of Wolverhampton. And as part of that, we were looking at people across all other sports. So different sports such as boxing, wrestling, there's a Wolverhampton Wrestling Club. But in terms of football, we had two special people on our panel. We had a under-23s defender called Cameron Condola, who has signed his first professional football contract and is of a South Asian heritage, but also Wolverhampton born and bred. He's been, I'm not saying making first team appearances, but he has played on the pitch at Molineux. So we had Cam Condola on our panel alongside his dad. I think parents play a crucial role in supporting any player, any child in any sports or professional environment, especially if it's elite. We also had the mother of a player called Ria Manu. So Ria Manu actually played at Wolverhampton Wanderers as a young child through kind of our Girls football program. Obviously, the structure between the men's and the women's game is quite different. But Ria Manu now actually plays for the first team for Birmingham City Women's. And she's 16 years old, making first team debuts. So for us, it's not just about having players in our academy system going into our first team. It's around the wider pathways of where they end up. We might only be part of the start of their journey or the end of their journey. But to think that there are players going through their system in the West Midlands, kind of for me, makes me incredibly proud. Within our system at the moment, I think the South Asian diaspora is quite multicultural in itself. You don't always have to be from the South Asian regions. You could be of mixed heritage, for example. So I think it is kind of looking at what do we mean by South Asian, and it's not always the traditional thing of making the first team appearance to be recognised as a professional player.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the amount of times I get questions which are usually, when are we going to see an Asian football player playing for England? I think we're very close. I think we have a number of players now that are coming through the elite pathway. I can name 6 players that have played in a professional football match in the leagues in the last season. I'll name some of them. Dylan Markande at Blackburn, Rohan Meher at Walsall, Sai Sachdev at Sheffield United, Aaron Drew at QPR, Keban Rai at Newport, Rohan Luthra at Cardiff City. We also have Ria Manu that you mentioned, Layla Banaras, who's now training with the first team at Birmingham City. She is one of the most prolific players, females of Muslim heritage in the country at the moment. We have very, very high hopes for her. She lives down the road from here. So there's many, many players coming through. There is also Binning, the lady from Wolverhampton. She plays for Wolves at the moment, under 14s. The players are coming through, which is great to see.
I just want to kind of conclude on South Asian females in football. So at Wolverhampton Wanderers, we are hosting a special exhibition. So it's a timeline of South Asian females who have progressed through football in different capacities. It's not an exclusive exhibition in the sense it doesn't cover every single person, but it spotlights some positive representation. It's free to view. It's in the Molineux Museum, so the Wolves Museum, and you can look at it from the outside, but when the museum is open, you can actually go inside and read it and explore it in your own time. So the exhibition has only ever been at Wembley or at Stamford Bridge in Chelsea, so it's really nice that it's got a bit of a permanent home in the Midlands until the foreseeable future. So if you want to engage with the exhibition, or want to learn more, or have any feedback of actually how can the game be a little bit more inclusive, or how can we embrace more knowledge and awareness, please feel free to approach me. I'm always open to ideas.
Brilliant. Let's dispel one more myth, Nilesh, before we go. And the question is that many people in this room potentially engage with football in some way, but going into a football match is quite scary, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. It can be really scary. And what we try and do is, if we take a community or a group of people who've never been before, we would try and do a session with them before they go into the game, to the match. So we would say, you know what, this is how it's going to be. This is what the atmosphere is going to be like. Here's where you can report things to if you do have any sort of abuse directed at you. And we also tell them, you know, it sounds silly, but where all the toilets are as well, because some people get nervous at half-time about going to the toilets or the restrooms because they're thinking, oh, I've got to go past so many people. So it can be daunting. I mean, people ask me this question all the time, and the hardest person for me to take to a football match is my mum, because she thinks there's no seats at football matches. She thinks she doesn't want to go. She thinks she's going to be like squashed. But obviously there are seats, because she's only seen them on TV. But yeah, I'm working on her.
Thanks, Nilesh. And I guess big question for everyone here, whether you're young and want to play football, whether you're a parent and you want to get your children into the game, or you want to be a volunteer or a coach or whatever it might be. What's your advice to the people in the room today that are across all aspects of our society that want to engage in sport and football in some way? What would be your words of encouragement to some of the parents and various people out there? Gurpri.
Football isn't football and sport isn't just sport. So what I'm trying to say by that is you got stuff like culture, faith, music, entertainment. Like there is a place for anything that you're passionate about to be translated into football. And the football, the type of things you can get involved in, whether it's ad hoc or on a more permanent basis, is endless. Like I'm always learning around the different roles that exist. So just be curious would be my words of advice.
For me, never be afraid to ask questions. If you want to know stuff about football and the career paths and everything else, there are people in football that you can ask questions to, and never be afraid. Keep asking questions and getting advice.
Thank you, guys. Have we got time for a quick Q&A? If there's anyone in the audience that wants to ask us a question. Is anyone that has a burning question? Ladies at the front, you look like you've got a question. Are you sure? Okay. Does anyone? Yes, sir?
Have you got a mic?
Sorry, I just wanted to ask. It's really difficult trying to get tickets for anything. You've got to be a supporter of a team. If you want to go and see an England match, it's impossible because you're not a member of a local team. We've tried to even travel to Barcelona, where it's even cheaper to fly there and get a tickets, hotel, accommodation for 5 of us than to go up to Liverpool. By the way, I'm a Liverpool fan. But what can you advise us, and how do we go about doing it? It's impossible.
How do you then how do you get tickets and things like that?
UNICEF ones, the UNICEF, the charity ones, anything as a family we can go. But we suffer the same dilemma. How do you get there, and the trouble, and we have the same issues.
Well, I think the challenge is that football is so popular. It's the #1 sport in the world. It's the biggest sport in this country. We are talking about 30 million spectators of the game in this country alone. In terms of the FA and who our stakeholders are, we are talking about 13 million participants of the game. When you think about professional football and you wanting to support your team or England, there are literally thousands of people that get themselves a fan ID, which is the way that it's an FA number, basically, and then going through ballots and various things to get tickets. I know, for example, Nilesh will probably talk about how he engages with fans. But the great thing is that you're interested and you want to be there. And I think don't stop trying, please. I think these environments they're a lot safer than we think they are. And of course, we don't tolerate discrimination of any kind. But in terms of the mechanism for getting tickets, it's always going to be difficult because we're talking about the national game. If you want England tickets, there are obviously ways in which through diversity groups. I'm going to let Nilesh talk about that.
Yeah, so in terms of tickets, like Dal said, it is difficult, and I work with diverse groups as well to try and get them to games. Like, for example, soon as Aston Villa, they got promoted, there's a 20,000 waiting list to get season tickets. Now, I've got a season ticket. I phoned them up to get my son on there. They said, yeah, there's 20,001 now. So it is one of those situations. So what I've tried to do now, and I've worked with Luton. Now Luton, another club that I've just come up, they're a 12,000-seater stadium, but they are fully booked now. They're packed because they're in the Premier League. But where they are based, a lot of people have never been to the ground before. So now I'm working with them to try and get them to go to the under-21 games because the tickets are more available there. So it's a way for them to connect to football. So there is always possibilities that we can look at and go, well, if you can't go to this game, then there's another game that you can go to, and it could be the under-21 game, could be the women's game, but there's always ways where you can enjoy the game.
Just to add on that, the women's game never gets sold out, and I think we can definitely start supporting more of the women's game. And then sometimes in the main stadium, football clubs might host like the under 23s. So I think there's different tiers to support, even if it means going into the stadium of your home support team. But I definitely agree. I think getting tickets is always going to be hard, and especially when it's a Premier League club or like your top 5 clubs as well.
And you support Liverpool, so, and Barcelona, and yeah. Are there any other? Thank you for your question. Are there any other questions?
Hi. Oh, God.
Hello.
Sorry. I'm Manny. My question is, so I grew up in a house where the men in my family loved football, particularly Man United. Just have to shout that out for my dad. And at some point in like my late teens, early 20s, I was discouraged from following football because I was a girl and I had to housework and cook and go on to be a wife, etc., etc. And I don't want that for the young generation in my family. So what would you say to families or to anyone out here really to encourage young girls who have that initial interest in football not to lose it? Because my niece is 5, she loved football, but then now she wants to do ballet. But how do you keep, what would you sort of suggest, you know, for families, for parents, for aunties and uncles to get their kids to come to more matches and keep that interest going?
I can start with it and then I'll hand over to Dal. So at Wolverhampton Wanderers, I feel like I can only answer it with some factual information rather than my opinion. So at Wolverhampton Wanderers Football Club, we have different memberships or ticket types. So we offer things like family tickets or group bookings, and that doesn't always have to be a mother and a father. It doesn't have to. It can be more around the traditional makeup of the modern family. So perhaps 2 adults, 2 kids. We do things like junior memberships, and as part of junior memberships, I think most clubs do it. It's targeted at different age groups, but also supporters who might be based overseas. So there's loads of incentives and things to keep young people engaged. And I want to say non-football activities. So we do like open training days. So generally, the stadium will not be, you know, completely sold out. They'll have more people of their age attending these events, and it's a bit more of a safe space when it comes to kind of engaging with young people. One of the things we've currently just introduced is a 3rd mascot. So on our match days, we've got 2 mascots, which are Wendy and Wolfie, their brother and sister, and now they've got a 3rd sibling who's just, I don't want to say the name in case, I think that he was being launched today, so Google it. It should be on Google. But I think there's loads of things around fan engagement that starts at a younger age to keep kids more engaged. And with the rise of social media, outside of the main channel, there's separate channels as well and separate things to kind of keep people engaged. But I think there's room for young girls, and I'm really sad to hear that, you know, some of the advice that you were giving when you were a young girl kind of made you not be able to join and get the most of it. But some of the advice that I always get told is be the adult that you wanted when you were a kid. So if you keep saying we're going or you can do this, it's reassuring positive behaviour.
Yeah, agree with you, Gurpri. The only thing I would add is that the rise of the women's game, it's been so phenomenal. And I think, you know, I'm looking over there, my 10-year-old daughter sitting over there, and she plays football, and she's encouraged by the family to play football. She's a centre-back, Lucy Bronze, and she's trying her best to, you know, continue to play as she gets older. There are now FA-related programs such as Weetabix Wildcats basically, where young girls can go and play football even when they're 5 or 6 years old, because it's a way of getting them into the habit of being physically active. It's a way of helping them to work as a team. It's a way of creating discipline. It's how you get along with others. And let's face it, at 5, 6 years old, they're going to have fun. They're not there to learn how to be a defender or a midfielder or anything. They're there to have fun. So at that kind of age, it's all about encouraging them to engage in the game, have fun, kick a ball around, learn how to cooperate with others, because it gives you so many life skills, like every sport does. You know, it gives you so many life skills. And that's the best place to start, is get the kids into some kind of physical activity. Our version of that is Wildcats and other things, in order for the kids, the girls in particular, to embrace football as a meaningful way to have fun. Nilesh?
Yeah, just from a fan aspect of it, with the younger generation, what I try and do is I go into schools or if I go into a community and the younger fans, I talk to them about the importance about supporting your local club and how that can be really important when you've got to support your club when they're winning, but also when they're losing, and and how you support them as well. And then as they grow up, they take that kind of skill of supporting something in a lifestyle of work. So if they become a team leader and there's one person that is not performing or whatever, but do they just not support that person? No, they still support it. It's the same when you're watching a football team. If some player's not playing well, you've still got to be able to support them and give them that encouragement to play well.
Thank you. I think we'll take one more question before we wrap up for the day. Has anyone got any more questions? No? Well, if you want to talk to us, we're all here. We're on the stand right behind you to the left-hand side, which is the FA for All stand. If you want to learn more about football, of course, you can look up what Wolves do. You can look up the Fans for Diversity campaign, but you can also go to thefa.com/Asian Inclusion, which is our dedicated pages on the work that we do for our communities and the way that we are attempting to create trust, build the perception, and continue to build a strong perception that football cares about our communities, as well as the work we do across faith and all the other things. So thank you all for listening today. I hope that you do get involved more in the game and that your children get more involved. And you know where we are. Come and talk to us. Have a great rest of the evening. Thank you for listening.